Good morning, everyone, and welcome. My name is Elisa Slazinska, and I work for the City of Chicago Department of Business Affairs and Consumer Protection, BACP. Welcome to the BACP webinar. We have adapted all of our regular business education workshops at City Hall into webinars like these until further notice. And on behalf of our Commissioner, Rosa Escarino, I want to inform you that business licenses can be processed online where applicable by visiting chicagobusinessdirect.org. And any emails or websites that I mention, I will post in the chat box, so you'll be able to reference them there. And if you are part of the BACP Entrepreneur Certificate Program, you can get credit for joining this webinar by sending an email to bacpoutreach@cityofchicago.org. If you want to learn about the program, you can visit chicago.gov/businesseducation. To help guide your business and employees during Chicago's reopening process, please visit chicago.gov/reopening. Also, BACP and the City of Chicago's Office of Emergency Management and Communications created Shy Biz Emergency Alerts. You can opt in to receive targeted emergency alerts for the business community. If you are interested, please visit chicago.gov/Shy Biz Alerts. We encourage attendees to ask questions. Please use the chat box and send your questions to all panelists. There will be a question and answer session at the end of the presentation. And today's webinar will be about the Illinois Business Interruption Grant Program. Our speakers will be from Accion, Chicago Neighborhood Initiatives, and Local Initiative Support Corporation Chicago. Our first presenter is Brad McConnell with Accion. Welcome, Brad.
Good morning, everyone. It is now 10:05. We're going to do the best we can to provide good information about the BIG initiative, Business Interruption Grants, in a handful of minutes so that then we can get to your questions right after that. So for introductions, my name is Brad McConnell. I'm the CEO of Accion Chicago. We are a mission-driven community development financial institution, and our mission is to help neighborhood entrepreneurs grow. We do that by providing the capital and the coaching and the connections that small business owners need to create jobs and wealth in their communities. We operate out of East Garfield Park, out of the Hatchery Food and Beverage Incubator, which we co-own and are one of the main tenants at. And I'm really excited to be the program administrator in partnership with the state for this Business Interruption Grant Program. So I'm going to share my screen in an attempt to briefly walk through two things. One is the set of basic criteria that the state has established and which Accion and our partners are now using in order to evaluate all of the grant applications that we're receiving. And then secondly, to walk through the grant application itself in order to give some basic pointers about how to be careful in fully populating all of the fields that are necessary in order to have a valid application. So I will start by sharing the screen that we have now in front of you, which is the page that the state has been using as its landing page for this initiative. So you'll see in front of you the Business Interruption Grants Program, or BIG. To find this, because this is an Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity site, you can Google DCEO BIG, and you'll come right to this page. But again, the Business Interruption Grants is a program in which overall there's $636 million that Governor Pritzker and the General Assembly are providing for small businesses throughout 2020. This is all using federal CARES Act dollars. For the fall, starting with the application process that just opened this past Thursday, we have $220 million to provide to small businesses across Illinois. So I want to show a few things on your screen for what we're calling round two. And so again, $220 million. And I'm going to emphasize just a handful of things for you. First, on just the criteria and the priorities that the state has established that we are now trying to execute against. And then I'll go through some of the resources that are available, including the application itself. So first, again, I want to repeat this as clearly as I can. All small businesses in Illinois are eligible to apply. The evaluation of the applications and the sequencing of the fundings will be based on the priorities that are listed here on this page. So to walk through these, first, $60 million of that $220 million pool will be dedicated towards the state is calling heavily impacted industries. So these are those that are like fully shut for a significant period of time, inclusive of movie theaters, performing arts venues, concert venues, the indoor recreation type facilities, which have been closed due to the pandemic. So $60 million will be dedicated there. $70 million will be dedicated towards disproportionately impacted areas. Now, within the city of Chicago, that is largely the south and west sides. And I'll show you in just a moment a way to see specifically if your business is located in a disproportionately impacted area. But $70 million dedicated there. There is a commitment to have at least half of the money go to downstate communities, but that implies, of course, that as much as half of the funding will go to Chicago and the surrounding areas. So significant amounts of grant dollars will be available. Aside from all of that, there's also going to be some prioritization done for specifically businesses that are directly impacted by the measures that were necessary, that were mandated by the governor and the mayor. And so these priority businesses include independently owned retail, tourism, hospitality-related businesses, and there's a series of others that I'll talk about more in just a moment. $5 million specifically for agriculture. And then for those who are part of the ISBEL program, the loan program that the state had done, there'll be a specific pot available to them too. All of which is to say is that we encourage all small businesses to apply, and then on the back end, we'll be doing lots of sequencing and sorting in order to try to provide as much assistance to those places that were most impacted as we can. So that's the very big, broad overview. But before showing the application itself, I just want to make sure that all of you are familiar with the additional resources that are available for you on this site. So I'm just going to go down slightly here. And you'll see that for the application details for round 2, if you're interested in looking at all of the questions before going into the application itself, you can do so by clicking on that link right here, which is called round 2 application questions. There's a checklist also there that lists the documents that you're going to be required to upload. All of that you can view in advance. And then there's a detailed eligibility criteria link here as well, where if you're interested in finding out more about exactly how these priority areas, these heavily impacted industries are defined, there's a 2-pager that's there that'll allow you to read that in more detail if you would choose to do so. Really important point here, if you have any questions at all about the process, about your application specifically, use these links that are listed here in English and here in Spanish in order to ask questions directly, and Accion's team will be responding to those in a rapid fashion. We have a goal of a 4-hour turnaround, and we absolutely will get back to you within 24 hours with all of the questions that you may have about your application, about the process in general. So please use those forums, and we will respond to you very quickly. Finally, you'll see that there are a number of webinars beyond this one if you need more details. You'll see listed here, and that'll be constantly updated over the course of time. And then the map that you see at the bottom of this page shows the way in which these disproportionately impacted areas have been defined geographically. So you can zoom in on Chicago and see specifically the areas within the city on the south and west sides, which have been deemed to be these disproportionately impacted areas. And it's, again, largely the south and west sides, which is a little bit in the north as well. There's a frequently asked questions that is also linked down here if you'd like to use that. And that is always going to be updated on a daily basis as we learn more. So that's the basics and all of the information that will be available to you at any time to refer back to all of which will be continually updated as we learn more, as we get more applications and more questions, and particularly this frequently asked questions link, which you see right here. So that's the basics. Let's then move to the application, and I'm going to click into that where you see this apply now, business interruption grant application. I should say that this is the version that is in English. Later on today, there will be a link that is posted where the entire application will also be available in Spanish. As you click into that, what you'll see is, I'm going to make this a little easier to read. You'll see is a screen like this, which just gives you brief orientation for how this application will work. And so you can read a little bit of basic information here, which essentially covers what we already covered, and then start. Now, once you start, and I will make this a little bit larger for you. Once you'll start, you will see that on this page, you'll see that on this page that there's brief application instructions, again, repeat of the criteria, which is posted on the page that we just saw before. I'm going to spend a little bit of time on these just to provide you a little more detail on the specific criteria. And then beneath that criteria, there will be the questions that follow. So we'll get down to all these questions in just a moment. Let's spend just a moment on the eligibility criteria. So you'll see them all listed here, but I'm just going to cite a few of these things. What we're looking for are businesses that had less than $20 million in revenue in 2019, or some prorated amount of that if you've been in operation for less than a year prior to the beginning of the pandemic in March of 2020. You can be either a for-profit of any sort of construction, whether it be an LLC or a corporation, a partnership, or you can be a 501c3 or C6 or C9 nonprofit. You will need to have been operating for at least 3 months prior to March 2020 in order for us to then substantiate the losses that we're going to be estimating and then sizing the grants on that basis. So what you'll see then in these final the final three criteria here, that we're looking for businesses that have had some revenue loss so that then we can size your grant appropriately based on how much you've lost, or alternatively, how much in expenses you've incurred since March 21st, which you've been unable to cover. And so we'll talk more about that, how that math is going to work as we go through the application. But these are the basic eligibility criteria. If you click on this link here, you'll then be sent to a much more detailed PDF, which has a lot more details on the criteria. But again, I'll encourage you to use, and that's the same link that you saw on the page before, I'll encourage you to use all of this background information if you'd like, just to sort of understand exactly how we're judging all of the applications as they come in. But let's then spend just a couple minutes on the application itself, and then I'll turn it over to my partners here at CNI and LISC, and then we'll get to your questions. So again, the FAQs that I mentioned before can be found here. Here is where you would ask your questions in English and Spanish. Again, these are the same links that you saw before from that home page. The first thing you'll be asked to do in the application is just tell us who you are. So business owner name and email, phone and address. You can see these pretty clearly listed here. Then we're going to ask for some basic information about your business. So the business name, and then if you're doing business as another name, if not, of course, the business name, the DBA name will be the same. We're capturing your business address, as you see here. And then we're going to ask if you are a for-profit or a nonprofit. We'll ask about industry. So you'll see here that this is the common categories of industries. I'm guessing this is largely familiar to most of you, where you select which industry you would characterize your business to be operating in. And then we get to some of the specifics that are unique to the categories and the pools that I mentioned before that we're using in order to make sure that we're targeting this $220 million as accurately as we can. So the first of those is this concept of heavily impacted industries. And so there's a list of these that you see here, which you can select from if it's appropriate for you. If you're not in a heavily impacted industry, that's okay. You're still eligible. It's just you'll be put into a different pot for evaluation purposes compared to the heavily impacted industries. If you are in a heavily impacted industry, then we're going to ask for a percentage of the business that is dedicated to that industry. So see, there's just a drop down here in which we're trying to get at the rough proportion of your business, if it does multiple things and not 100% to a particular industry, that you would characterize to be applicable to that particular industry. If you have indoor space, we're asking for whether it's a space that allows you to have 100 people or more or less. And then after all of that heavily impacted industry section, we're going to ask for a little more detail about if you're in a different industry. And so let's say you're in one of those what we call the priority industries. So the independent-owned retail, restaurant, bar, tavern, tourism, and such. And again, if it's none of the above, that's fine. But we are trying to just identify which business you're in so that we get you into the right pot for evaluation purposes. And again, we ask about that percentage that's dedicated to this particular industry versus heavily impacted industry if it's relevant for you. We then wrap up this section by asking a handful of additional questions. What is your business FEIN or ITIN? That's your tax ID number. If you have a DUNS number, add that here. Your business website, if you use social media, tell us that. These are not required fields, as you can see, because there's no red asterisk next to the label. Then we ask for when your business started. So you give us the date. This is a month and a year. And then we ask for your gross operating revenue in 2019. And then if you filed your taxes or not in 2019, yes or no. And the reason why we have to ask this is because we're going to be collecting required documents, which I'll show you in just a moment. And it depends on whether you had enough activity in 2019 to file or not, or if, for example, you started your business in December of 2019, January of 2020, and therefore you didn't necessarily file. If that's the case, then we need to shift the required documents because you wouldn't have the 2019 tax return. I'll show you why that's important in just a second. We need to know if you've had emergency funding. And so we're going to ask, and this is, of course, since the pandemic began, we're going to ask about a number of different programs here. And so we'll just ask you to check a box there. Then we'll ask if you have any assistance from a number of organizations who are here to help. And so there's a long list here, which we'll be constantly evaluating and adding to as we go. And so if you have received assistance from one of those organizations, we'd just like to know that, so we'll have you list there. And then finally, if there is if you're just a sole proprietor, and you don't have a separate business bank account, we need to treat that differently as well. So again, we'll ask yes or no there. We'll do a handful of questions just on demography. These do not have anything to do with your eligibility for the grant, but we do want to know if we're targeting properly for all of our small business owners, gender, race, ethnicity, veterans, disabilities, and such. And finally, we need to capture the business bank information so that we know where to send the money if you are selected. So bank name, the name of the account holder, your account number, the routing number, and account type. You'll then be asked to certify that you understand all of the requirements, and all the certifications are posted right there at that link. And then you're able to use your mouse to do your signature there, hopefully a little bit better than I just did. And then, depending on all of that, you'll be asked to upload documents. So I'm going to go back and just select a couple things to show how that document upload will work. So let's say that you are a sole proprietor without a separate business bank account. You'll see that depending on what you select, you'll then have a number of different criteria that you're going to constantly be asked for. And then once you get down to the bottom, there's going to be some specific documents that are going to be asked to upload. And if, let's say, you need assistance in uploading your documents, we're going to give you more choices. So you'll be able to click here to add more documents and such. But let me just pause here for a second. This is a really important point. The way this application works is that depending on the type of business that you have, and depending on the length of time you've been in business, we're going to ask you to upload very specific documentation so that we have the documentation we need to size your grant. So for example, if you are in a heavily impacted industry and you've had absolutely no opportunity to operate at all since March, since the pandemic began, we're going to be collecting a series of documents based on the expenses that you've been incurring, and we'll ask you to upload those documents one by one. Because we need to know what it is that you've had to continue to spend money on so we can help you in providing grant assistance to help cover some of those expenses. Alternatively, if you weren't a heavily impacted industry and you're not a huge performance venue or something like that, but instead, for example, you are a sole proprietor and you have as an independent contractor or sole proprietor, a number of business revenue losses that you'd like to show us, we're then going to ask for different documents. Those are going to be business bank statements. And in that case, it's going to be showing us your before and after revenues through your business bank statements. We'll ask you to upload those. So this section in here is going to look differently depending on that. And we can talk about that more in detail if you'd like. But suffice to say that the documents that you upload are going to be really important to get right. And we want to make sure that you're uploading the right ones so that we know that we can evaluate your business on before and after, and then provide you with a grant to help cover either your revenue losses or the expenses that you've incurred. Okay, so with that, at the end, you just submit your form and you're complete. I'm going to pause there so that we can move to our other hosts for this and then get to your questions. So I'm going to stop sharing and turn it back over to BACP.
Great, thank you so much, Brad. Like it was mentioned, we will have time for question and answers at the end of the entire webinar. Please keep sending your questions into the chat box and send them to all panelists. And with that, we're going to change presenters.
All right.
All right, Ciere, you are now the presenter. If you want to share your file.
Absolutely. While I'm sharing my file, why don't we start with a quick introduction, because this is myself and Marcus Yancey from LIST presenting. Marcus, you want to start with the intro or pull up our file?
Sure. Thank you, Sarah. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, BACP, for allowing us to be able to present this morning. Again, my name is Marcus Yancey. I'm an Economic Development Lender and Special Projects Officer at LIST Local Initiative Chicago Corporation. LIST is one of the largest nonprofit financial institutions and economic development organization in the country. We like to really provide support in underdeveloped, underserved communities by supporting projects and programs to revitalize communities and bring greater economic opportunity to the residents. So we invest in affordable housing, growing businesses, providing safer streets, quality of education, and programs that connect people with financial opportunities. So we provide the capital, strategy, and the know-how to local partners in order to be able to get this type of work done. So we know that on a national level, our work impacts the lives of millions of Americans in both urban and rural areas across the country. We've been around since 1979 here in Chicago. As a national organization, we've probably produced about a little bit over $1 billion in grants, about $4.5 billion in loan, and then providing about $16.5 billion in equity. So we've had a total investment through the country of roughly about $65 billion. And in particular, in the city of Chicago, we like to have impact on the west side and the south side of Chicago. In particular, my job is to really support small businesses. And so that's why we're very appreciative to the state of Illinois for allowing us to be able to take part in this, as well as CNI to administer this grant. Ciere?
Yeah, so I'm Ciere Boatright, Vice President of Real Estate and Inclusion for Chicago Neighborhood Initiatives. For those of you that are less familiar with CNI, we are a nonprofit organization. We focus on high-impact real estate development throughout Chicago's underserved neighborhoods. We also focus on deploying capital to small businesses in some of those similar neighborhoods. In Pullman in particular, we've coordinated investment of over $350 million over the last 10 years to create large-scale developments like Method and some affordable housing and community and small-scale, small business retail development opportunities. But we also develop in other areas that have similar opportunities and similar needs. So like Marcus just mentioned, CNI is excited to partner with LIST to deploy this much-needed grant dollars to small businesses in need, and not just small businesses, nonprofits in need as well. So we have a presentation that we'll quickly go over, and then Marcus will share a lot of information in terms of the FAQs, as well as info on the actual application, and then we'll save some time at the end for Q&A. I'm going to jump right in, just in the interest of time, and describe the program. So this program is actually through DCEO, which is the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. It's the Rebuild Illinois for Distressed Communities Grant Program. 1 second to advance the slide. So the Rebuild Distressed Communities is a $25 million economic recovery program to support economically distressed Illinois businesses and communities that have sustained property damage as a result of the civil unrest after May 25th of 2020. And so what businesses are eligible? So businesses that are located in a zip code that DCO has identified as eligible for the grant dollars. There are hundreds of zip codes listed, and when Marcus goes through kind of the application and a couple of the FAQs, we'll show you guys how to locate all the distressed zip codes. They must have, again, sustained property damage on or after May 25th as a result of the civil unrest. The type of businesses include, but certainly are not limited to, convenience and retail stores, grocery stores, pharmacies, personal services like dry cleaners, barbershops, salons, spas, professional services. Those are your doctors, your lawyers, accountants, real estate brokerage firms, restaurants and taverns, small goods and retail, and last but not least, industrial and warehouses. Again, this list does not include all the various businesses that are included as eligible businesses, just a few. Again, the FAQs and the DCEO website will go into far more detail. We just wanted to provide a brief snapshot here. So criteria for selection, we just have to demonstrate project need as defined as the inability for the businesses to rebuild after sustaining damages from rioting and looting that occurred, again, on or after May 25th. Financial feasibility. Feasibility is assessed on a case-by-case basis to determine if the requested repairs can be completed at a cost that is within the range of funding per applicant. So I'll quickly talk about that range. The grant amounts range from $1,000 to $200,000. The commitments for jobs, retention, and reopening. We want to know how many jobs will be retained here. And then the ability to reopen during the Restore Illinois plan or commitment to reopen when allowed at 100% occupancy. So we have some of the eligible work, and we have a list of ineligible work. So the eligible cost for the program must meet the requirements of a bondable expenditure. And so for the Rebuild Illinois grant program, we have a list of some of the eligible scopes of work. Structural repair or reconstruction of existing building structures, your storefronts, your entrances, doors, brickwork. Total repair and replacement of roofing and windows. Total replacement and installation of security shutters, lighting systems, electrical systems, plumbing systems, mechanical systems. Ineligible work, those are your operating costs, including your insurance, utilities, management fees, maintenance, those minor touch-ups, patch roofing, changing of lighting, some of those minor changes, routine and reoccurring operational costs, and expenses that have been reimbursed through a separate grant program in response to the civil unrest. So how are funds dispersed? So there's two bases. We have a reimbursement pot, and then we have new projects. Some businesses couldn't afford to wait. They provided the necessary kind of, funds to repair their work. And so 30% of the $25 million are for reimbursement. So for those eligible costs that you guys already cover, we can reimburse. Still the same application process, but we can reimburse those small businesses. And then there's the new projects, and those new projects are the eligible costs that I mentioned before. The work that has not been performed, that you need to perform in order to be fully operational. In the case of the new projects, we'll have a contractor or an architect come in, do a site visit, help define the scope. You guys would have already defined the scope in your application. The architect or the contractor will agree or say there may be some additional work that needs to be performed in order for you to operate completely. And then the grantee, in our case, LISC and CNI, will then hire qualified contractors to make the new repairs or perform the new construction. There is a focus on ensuring that there's equity and inclusion here. And so the state wants to make sure that they're qualified contractors to the BP. There's a preference or a priority, if you will. For those of us that are less familiar with BP, it's equivalent to the City of Chicago's MBE, WBE, DBE program to make sure that we have contractors engaged that are minority, women-owned, and those with disabilities, and veterans, BBE as well. So reimbursements, just a little detail. We require receipts and pictures to verify the work was completed. Depending on the reimbursement amount, there's various levels of approvals that are required. So, for example, if you have a reimbursement request less than $10,000, we'll do our due diligence on the application and request supporting documents. If the amount is between $10,000 and $25,000, we'll do the due diligence on the application, review the supporting documents, and the architect will review at the program's discretion. If it's more than $25,000, architects come on site, review, do the due diligence on the application and supporting documents. The architects may adjust the scope of completed work and recommend new projects if additional work is deemed necessary to help to ensure that the building is secure and safe. For new projects, an architect will verify the work required and adjust the scope of work as necessary. The architect, in some cases the general contractor, will re-verify. So they'll come out and do site visits at 50%, 75%, and full completion of construction. Depending on the scope of work, we may engage a general contractor. Just a general rule of thumb, if it's multiple scopes of work, multiple trades that we have to engage, we'll likely engage a GC to oversee that, to make sure that from a coordination standpoint, things run as smooth as possible. CNI and LIST will be responsible for soliciting the bids again. We'll require at minimum 2 bids from each scope of work, and then we'll narrow it down based on the most qualified lowest bid. CNI and LIST will then pay the vendors or the GC directly. So the small business isn't required to front the funds. CNI actually oversees that entire process. And LIST. So for more information, there's a lot more information. We wanted to make this presentation kind of short and sweet, just to kind of go over the picture, the grant requirements, and expectations, if you will. But the link here has all the information, including the FAQ and the application, which Marcus will go over now.
All right. Thank you, Ciere. Just give 1 second here so I can share my screen.
Hi, Marcus. 1 second while I make you a presenter.
Thank you.
Okay, Marcus, you should be able to share your screen now.
All right, I think we're good to go here. So as Ciere mentioned, a lot of this information is going to be housed on DCEO's website. So that's just basically the last the last slide that you've seen. If you were to click on that link, it would bring you to this page here, just giving you some general information about the program. Applications are not open yet. We're hoping to have them open around the second week of October. It's very important, too, that we give this particular amount of time to be able to allow business owners to gather the necessary documentation that is required in order to have a fully executed and complete application. So now I'm going to just go very briefly through the FAQs. I know that there may be some questions, so I would like to address some of those that I think are very important as far as the application process is concerned. As Ciere mentioned, that this particular grant is open to, the state of Illinois. However, there are certain zip codes that are prioritized. And so if you see here, there's a section where you can click on to see what zip codes are eligible. And I believe there are also, so there's quite a few zip codes as you see here. This is a state opportunity. I know that most individuals are within the city of Chicago. So, we advise you to kind of take a look here, see if your zip code is there. That way you kind of get an understanding of where you'll be prioritized as funds are available. Let's go back here. So that's one quick question. So a lot of people, want to know, like, what type of documentation is going to be required. So the photos, receipts for invoices for repairs that are already completed. If you have any closer bids, definitely have that information, any police reports that you have, and then lease mortgage statements or deeds of property. So we need to know who's actually in site control of the property. So if you're a renter and your landlord, is the owner, we would need to be able to get permission from him in order for us to be able to execute the work that needs to be done. So that'll be very important, as well as any insurance claims. So if you did submit insurance and it was denied, as we know that some submissions were declined due to not having coverage for civil unrest, we want to be able to see that so that we can support your application. There also will be several rounds that will occur as funds are deployed, and we do this to make sure that we can be good stewards to the community and be able to process your applications in a timely fashion. So don't fret if you see that a round of applications are open and then they close. It will reopen, and we will notify you when that does take place. A lot of people also have the question, how do I get paid? So as Ciere stated, there are two different, tracks that you can take here. And one of the tracks is to do the reimbursable grants for items that are already paid for. The actual business owner will be reimbursed those funds directly. For any new projects that are working, we will actually go ahead and pay the actual vendor or the general contractor that is performing the work. So funds will not be given directly to the individual or the small business. So that's what you see here as far as the sub-grants are concerned. Those are funds that will come directly to the business owner. New projects that will actually go directly to the construction, to the general contractor or to the vendor that's performing the services. And then we also talk about some of the things that can get repaired. It could be structural repairs, roofing, windows, total replacement of security shutters, lighting systems, and et cetera. And then also looking at the ineligible expenses, so operating costs. Obviously, this is not one of those grants where you can use to kind of get you to float through some of the operational costs, such as payrolls and other things like that. That's kind of some other grant programs that I believe that is included in the big program that would allow you to be eligible for those types of grant funds. The grant funds do not need to be repaid. So this is a grant. So once the funds are deployed to you, you will not have to pay them back, which makes this an exceptional program to be able to support these small businesses in the city of Chicago. I'll briefly switch over to the application that you see here. There is an opportunity to be able to save your application here. So if you check this box here, you're able to save your progress, and that'll allow you to be able to come back if you need to, step away for a moment, or there's documentation that you want to verify as you're putting the input. It's a very simple and straightforward application for the most part. Just simple information such as your name, business information, the address, the zip code is going to be very important. We also want to make sure that, how did you hear about the program? I think it's very vital for us to be able to make sure that we're doing the proper outreach and leveraging all channels to be able to get the word out about this particular program. Additional information about the business. So what type of entity are you? How many years have you been in business? Also, what are the revenues? So we're looking at revenues from January of last year, 2019, until December 31st of 2019 to get an idea of what your current revenues are. The employment piece is very important too, so we ask that you have that particular information about part-time and full-time employment as of January 20th, 2020, and then as of April 2020. Just to try to get an idea of, how your business is fluctuating. If there was a drop-off due to COVID or civil unrest, this information can be captured here. Then we also talk about the industries. So please select one of the industry as it correlates to you. As you can see, there's roughly about 20 different options, and then we also do have a section of others. The socioeconomic data is really important as well, too. We want to be able to really identify and see who we are supporting. As spoken before, we are very focused on supporting minority-owned, veteran-owned, and women-owned businesses throughout the city of Chicago. There's also some brief information as far as what size grant you will need. That gives us a really good estimate. Some people believe that, hey, I only need $25,000 in repairs. But who knows, once our team comes out and actually does a, scope of work and see that there could be extensive, more damage than you actually see once they start peeling back the layers. And so your amount can go from 25 to 45. So we'll be here to support you on really making a good assessment to what your actual grant amount is. But we like to get an idea. So if you can list a number as close as possible, that'll be great. And as Ciere also mentioned, all damages should have taken place on or after May 25th. So there will be some documents or some certifications that you will need to provide us just to kind of show that that damage did take place. So that can be done through a police report, or, you know, if you did file an insurance claim, all of that information should be in there. And then last, we just asked for a brief description of, you know, the financial need of the business. Like if this particular grant program was not available, like how would it impact your business and, you know, getting reopened and getting back to being a fully operational business. And then the last question here, as you see, is just, you know, provide a detailed summary of any cleanup or recovery actions that have taken place or that are needed about the damages that were sustained. So as you complete this application, it doesn't finalize or guarantee that you'll receive a grant. We will review, and if you are selected to be able to move forward, there will be additional information that we will be asking for, and you'll be able to find those documents listed in the FAQ section, as I stated before. So just the photos of damages, police reports, and et cetera. So I think that's about it on our end. I will turn it back over to BACP, and if there's any questions, we'd love to be able to answer them.
Great, thank you so much, Marcus. So we did have a lot of questions come in, so we're going to filter through them. I know Brad has been answering a lot of them in the chat box as well. Since we do have some people that are joining us via phone, I will be reading the questions out loud. And some of our panelists believe they could answer it. Almost these are what's it called, buzzer beater, if you want to just answer the question. First one is, what if I haven't filed my 2019 tax return as yet? I have an extension to file. Can I upload the unfiled tax return?
I'm going to assume, this is Brad speaking, I'm going to assume that the questions are for the big grants unless someone specifies that they want to direct that to Ciere or Marcus. But in this particular case, if you've not filed yet, then there is an option to select at the bottom of the application in which you specify that I have not filed my 2019 taxes yet. And then you'll be prompted for any required documentation list, a series of other documents that essentially we'll use as a replacement for what otherwise you would have provided us through your 2019 filed taxes. So there's no need to upload a non-signed, non-filed tax return.
If I made an error in the big application, can I go back and fix it?
So you have two options here. One, I'll say that in the immediate crush of the applications that we received, something like 3,000 or so we received on Thursday, we had two issues we needed to quickly resolve. One was based on there was an issue with leading zeros in an account number, so we quickly fixed that, but that was frustrating for a few people. And then secondly, we had to increase the size of what was allowed for uploaded documents. So we have a 25 meg max size limit for an application. And so we have an initial methodology to use in order to solve for that, which you'll see at the bottom of the application. In either case, or if you just got halfway through it and then just got distracted, stopped, got pulled away, whatever it might be, you either go back to your application, you can start a brand new application, or you can contact the help desk using those links in either English or Spanish in order to be very clear about what it is that you need help with and what your business EIN number is or ITIN number is that you put in so that we can find your application quickly, and we'll help you through it on that basis. Any of those options are fine.
Are taxi drivers self-employed who haven't been able to work since March qualify for this award/grant?
Yes.
As the application changed from Thursday afternoon until Friday, the heavily impacted industries on Thursday had different required forms compared to Friday's app. I had to resubmit on Friday because routing number wasn't able to populate on Thursday.
Yes, so this gets to those two issues that I cited before. And so we have made those two updates to the application to make it easier to apply. It seems as though they've certainly been helpful since the volume of applications has continued to be very, very high. So if you applied on Thursday afternoon versus applying on, say, Friday afternoon, you will see those two differences. And I think those are pretty solid improvements to the application to make it easier to apply, yes.
I believe you already answered, but what if I haven't submitted my tax return as yet?
Yeah, select that option at the bottom of the application, and then you'll be prompted for a different set of required documents to upload.
Similar question, if I had a business loss on my 2019 tax return, can I still apply?
Yes.
Can I get a grant for the second round if I received one already in the first round?
Yes. So importantly here, if you either got a grant through BIG round one, or you received a PPP, which is potentially forgivable, or you received some other assistance, emergency assistance, you're still eligible to apply for this round of BIG. But the important issue here is you just need to have more losses to cover so that you're not covering the same losses twice through federal dollars, because that's illegal under the CARES Act. My hunch is that just about every small business has had such heavy losses, either in reduction in revenue or in expenses, you still need to cover even without any revenue. That's not much of a problem. There's plenty, unfortunately, of that kind of loss to cover. But that's the only criteria that you need to meet in order to apply twice.
If my NFP was the recipient of a DCEO grant some years ago, does that disqualify us?
No.
Is the grant first come, first serve?
No. So this is an important point that I should have mentioned before. The way the application is going to work in this scenario here is that we're going to run a rolling application throughout the rest of this year. All of the funds need to be distributed to small business owners by December 30th of this year at the absolute latest, and we're going to be trying to beat that substantially. That is the deadline that the federal legislation requires. But the way that we're going to be organizing the evaluations is that we're just going to take each week's applications as a pot. And then, say, for example, from last Thursday through this coming Friday, at the end of day Friday, we're going to take those applications. We're going to run all the sorting that's necessary to put those into heavily impacted industries or priority industries or disproportionately impacted areas, all the things we talked about in the beginning. And then we're just going to run a lottery on all the applications we received within each one of those pots. And then all the applications that are in the sort of none of the above pot, there'll be plenty of those as well. And then on that lotterized basis, within that window of applications, so it'll be sort of each week's applications, we're going to start at the top and evaluate the applications for eligibility and then stop once we hit some threshold, and then we'll move on to the next week's applications, but include in that next week's lottery all of those who weren't selected in the first week's lottery. So you'll be continually eligible if you haven't been selected yet, but there's no particular difference in applying, say, last Thursday compared to today. There will be a difference compared to whether you apply today or you apply next week, because each week will have its own individualized lottery.
Several questions coming in on eligibility of S Corp, LLCs, real estate businesses. Is there a link or a web page where it outlines the eligible businesses?
Yes. So on the home page that we were looking at in the beginning, there are two things. One is a detailed list of eligibility criteria. There's another that is a frequently asked questions list. If you have a question about whether your business is eligible and you don't really see the detail that you're looking for, I also encourage you to just ask that question specifically with your scenario via those English and Spanish question links, and then we will get right back to you on the answer to that.
My nonprofit started in March. Am I eligible?
Eligible businesses have to have begun 3 months before the pandemic, so unfortunately, no.
Can multiple businesses apply?
Yes. So if you are a business owner, you are eligible to apply for more than one business, but you'll only be awarded one grant. So if, say, for example, you happen to be a business owner who has a business in a heavily impacted industry, you have another business that is doing something totally unrelated. If you'd like, you can apply for both of those businesses. If you win in one of those businesses, then you'll be taken out of the application pool for the other.
Slightly specific, small tourist company that provides transportation services, but not shuttle bus or charter bus type, no hired employees, personal business. Can the owner apply for this grant?
Yes. In sort of thinking through very specific cases like that, I don't see why not. But certainly if there's more detail in there that the business owner would like to provide, use that question link as you'd like to. But I think generally the answer should be yes, I think.
What if you were heavily impacted, but your category is not listed on the pull-down menu?
No problem. If you are a business that wants to apply and you don't see your particular industry in that heavily impacted industries list, there are the rest of the lists that are also part of these pots. So there's a priority industry list, so look there. Otherwise, just make sure that your industry is categorized appropriately in that very first question, because in any case, you're still eligible. All we're trying to do is figure out which pot to place your business in.
I believe you already answered this, but is a DUNS number required?
No.
What if I started as a sole proprietor and then switched to LLC in July and I have two different EIN numbers?
Use the EIN number for your application that is the one that matches any documentation that you're uploading in the required document section, so that then we can make those matches appropriately.
I did not upload my documents before submitting. Am I able to go back?
Yes. So again, you can either go back to your application, or if it's easier for you, just contact the help desk and make sure that you provide your business number or your ITIN, depending on what your sort of unique identifier is for your business that you put into your application, so that we can then help you to match the uploaded documents you provide to us with that application. And then it'll look for eligibility checking purposes just like you would have uploaded them in the first place.
And just Ciere, they're asking for a link during your presentation that was mentioned. If you can, just put it into the chat box.
Sure. I actually put the link to the FAQs and the application in the chat box.
Perfect.
And then I can email the slides to BACP following the meeting.
Okay. And just so everyone knows, this webinar is being recorded and it will be uploaded to the BACP YouTube channel. And that's youtube.com/Chicago BACP. I will post that in the chat box as well. I was not able to enter my account number. I had to fill out the application multiple times and upload forms again because it would not save.
Yeah, that's the issue that I was mentioning before about the leading zeros. Never mind the technology issue, but we addressed that, and now you either can go back to that application to make adjustments, or probably easier, just send a note to the help desk using that link, either in English or Spanish, and then just provide us what you weren't able to provide before, and then we'll make sure that you're in good shape there.
What is the deadline for submission and rough timing to receive the grant if you are awarded one?
I'll answer this one for BIG, and then maybe Ciere and Marcus, you can answer it for your program as well. So there's no submission deadline for BIG because this is going to be evaluated on a rolling basis. All of the dollars need to get out by December 30th. But importantly, as I mentioned before, we're doing this kind of weekly pooling of applications. And so there's no difference between, say, a Monday and a Friday of the same week. There is a difference between a Monday and a Monday of the next week as to which lottery you end up in. So I'd say generally the sooner the better, but the important thing to take away, I suppose, is it's far better to have a fully populated application inclusive of all of the uploaded required documents and do that a day later than it is to rush and get an application that's sort of half ready in order to sort of meet some imaginary deadline that really doesn't in this case exist.
Can one application be used for multiple locations, or is it per location?
The application is specific to a business, and therefore if your business is separated in which it's a different EIN or totally different business bank statements, the document, different tax returns, then those are treated as two different businesses. If you're running all of the business under one business entity and you just happen to have multiple locations, then just put in one location for that business. And I would suggest to you that if you have businesses in which one location is in a disproportionately impacted area and another one is not, then use the disproportionately impacted area location. But otherwise, there's really no distinction between the two.
Do we need to have a brick and mortar that was damaged before qualifying for the grant?
For the DCO grant, the repair grant, yes, you'll have to have damage, and damage that was either paid for, where you're seeking reimbursement, or damage that has not been addressed yet in order to be eligible.
Are we still able to submit applications even if you haven't had any income in your business?
Yes.
We have a bit of a unique business that provides food for festivals and events without having a physical location. I see under, is your business in any of the following industries or activities? An option for support service of arts or events. Would we qualify?
Yes.
So any restaurant with substantial sales decreases can apply as long as we did not have more than $20 million in revenue for 2019?
Yes.
What month do they consider the start of the pandemic?
March.
Going back to eligible businesses, are home businesses eligible? Are online businesses eligible?
Yes. So the home businesses and frankly the online businesses will all need to have a business address. The business address can't be a PO box, just for clarity, and that's again just federal rules that we're following. But provided that the business does have a business location, which would match the location that is articulated on the business bank statements, then home businesses, online businesses are eligible, yes.
How many grants are you looking to award?
I'll answer that for big and then ask Marcus or Ciere to answer for distressed. The answer is we're not sure. We know the amount of dollars that we need to distribute or are eager to distribute to the businesses who need those dollars, and we'll put them to good use in stabilizing their businesses. But it's going to depend upon the average sizes of those grants based on what we evaluate in the revenue losses or the expenses incurred as to how many grants will be distributed that will make up that grand total of $220 million.
And I think for our program, it's a similar answer. It will really be dependent on the ask, the dollar amount that we see. It's a smaller dollar amount. Obviously, we can help more applicants. If it's larger dollar amount, it's fewer, but it's $25 million in total for the Rebuild Illinois for Economic Distress Area Program. But just to kind of put it in perspective, and again, the range is from $1,000 to $200,000. So there's an opportunity to help a lot of businesses there.
When will the first notifications go out?
For BIG, our expectation is that we'll begin the funding in roughly middle of October, so about 3 to 4 weeks from now. And then we'll be doing so on a rolling basis as we do those weekly lotteries, weekly evaluations. We'll get into weekly fundings as well.
And for our grant program, this was an opportunity for us to share the opportunity that's forthcoming. We'll also begin taking applications within the next couple of weeks. The DCO website that's in the link will have the updated date in which we begin accepting applications. We just wanted to use this as an opportunity to let everyone know what will be required from the application, what documentation you'll have to submit, and what the time frame are and what the eligibility requirements are. So again, the link that's shared on the screen now and the link that's in the chat will have an updated date, which will begin taking applications soon, but anticipate it within the next 2 to 3 weeks.
And can a sole proprietor use their Social Security number?
Yes.
Can new startups apply for the BIG program?
Businesses that are eligible have to have been in business for 3 months before the pandemic began. So you would need to have had some business activity that you can substantiate by the beginning of 2020.
Does my business have to generate a certain yearly dollar amount to be eligible?
No.
And I just want to mention again that the webinar is being recorded and will be available at youtube.com/Chicago BACP. Can grant funds be used for payroll and utilities?
Yes.
If a business license expired prior to March 2020, but you were still operating and were affected, can you still apply?
I don't know the answer to that one. So I would encourage you to ask that question specifically through that form, which we're using, the English or Spanish version of that form, which we're using not just to answer questions as we receive them, but also to continue to get prompts for us to then continue to populate the frequently asked questions documents so everyone can get the value of those answers. But that is one that I will ask about and then get added to the FAQs.
How will the grant amounts be determined?
We'll have this completely transparently published for Friday. And the reason we haven't done so yet is because there's going to be a difference here between the heavily impacted industries and the very large number of other industries. For the heavily impacted industries, we're going to be evaluating the size of the expenses incurred since March, since the beginning of the pandemic. And that's what the required documents will be listed are very focused on those expenses, so payroll, utilities, rent or lease, et cetera. But for the non-heavily impacted industries, we're going to be evaluating just your losses and revenue, which are far easier, I think, to substantiate, because all we're asking for are your business bank statements for 2 months before the crisis and 2 months after the crisis. We're just going to look at the differences in the debits in both. And so it'll be something like covering 2 months worth of or 1 month worth of expenses or revenues. But again, that'll be published by the end of the week.
We do not have damage with the civil unrest, but our revenues are severely hurt because people do not want to shop in our area. Can I apply for loss of revenues?
For big, yes. Ciere?
Yeah, that would be a no on our. Yeah, we won't supply any grant funds for operational costs.
Big, yeah.
Yeah.
How will amounts be determined? How will a grant amount be determined?
For our grant program based off needs and design scope, again, from $1,000 to $200,000. So the architect will come out, will review your scope that you reference in the application, will confirm that that is in fact the scope, and then the bids from the contractors, once they review the scope, will determine how much you're awarded. And again, C&I and LIFT will pay the contractors directly once the repairs are complete.
What if I don't find my zip code on the list?
So that list includes hundreds of zip codes. If for some reason your zip code doesn't appear, we still encourage you to complete an application. There is priority for those zips within the distressed areas, those that were heavily impacted by the civil unrest post May 25th of 2020. However, we don't want to discourage any potential applicants from completing the application. We'll review on a case-by-case basis and work with GCEO.
Do the grants cover damage to vehicles?
No, it wouldn't recover any costs for vehicles. Because these are capital bond funds, it has to be more so along the lines of something that is in place, has life expectancy of 10 years. So we're just talking about actual physical damages to the property and not any vehicles or anything like that.
A slightly specific question. I have a home daycare. I've been using my personal social security number as a sole proprietor. I do have an EIN number, but my business was being ran under my name until I got all my business affairs in order. I applied, I received an SBA grant previously and was asked to prove documents, so I provided my social security number. What's the best, So I provide my social security number and EIN. I was cleared, but what is the best solution if I reapply?
I just recommend that you use the ID number that matches what is on the documents they're going to be uploading. So if your business bank statement, say, for example, has on it your EIN or alternatively your social security number, even if it's sort of masked out, so they do star SOTAR on your last four digits, whatever that would be, then I'd recommend you use that one. Because really what we're trying to do is to verify that the business is a legitimate business, you are who you say you are, and therefore we're trying to do those matches. To the extent that you can make those matches work for us, it just allows us to substantiate your eligibility quicker.
Can churches apply if losses are not structural damage?
Ciere, I think that one's for you.
For ours, it's more structural. It's your brick and mortar damages as a result of the civil unrest. Marcus, you want to add anything else to that?
No, I think that's pretty clear. That it's just simply, physical damages.
If there is something omitted from the big application, will you contact the submitter for clarification?
Sequencing these such that every application we get that is fully populated and we have everything that we need, those go directly into the get moving fund bucket. For those that are missing something, in that case, we will conduct some outreach to the applicants in order to collect what we need, and it depends on how fast we get that back as to how fast we can evaluate the application in full. We won't do a full evaluation of partial applications, and so it is really important to provide everything that you can in your application. That'll speed up you being in the application review queue.
And I just wanted to mention something real quick, too, because I seem like, some of the questions, there's a lot of crossover that, the big grant is general, which is what Brad and his team is responsible for. But within the big grant, there are several different components, which the Rebuild Distressed Communities grant is kind of a sub under the initial larger big grant. So I think in a short-winded way to say it is, if you have issues with your business as far as payroll, working capital, those types of things, Brad would be the direction to go in. And then if there's anything as far as like structural damages, physical property damage, then the, Rebuild Illinois Distressed Communities Grant would be your opportunity. So they're separate, but under the same umbrella, so to speak.
Good point.
Great, thank you for that clarification. What defines 3 months before the pandemic? We started bringing in revenue on January 22nd, but the business was established and training in place with employees being hired and being paid in 2019. Do we qualify?
Yes.
I think we answered a lot of the questions. For some of the very in-depth questions, can each panelist provide the best way to get one-on-one help?
Yeah, and I'll take Marcus' point here, which is quite right. For the broader big application, use the English and Spanish forms that I mentioned before, which you can find right on the DCEO landing page. If you just do DCEO big to get to that landing page, which is entitled Business Interruption Grants at the top. If you're on the application itself, again, you can click on the English and Spanish question form, which is right at the top of the application. Either way, it'll take you to the same place. In that situation, you'll just get a very simple form in which you just type in your name, your business ID, and then your question. We answer that question for you directly and get back to you directly, and we'll do that same day, or at least within a 24-hour window, so that then your precise situation is something that you get real advice on right away.
Marcus and Ciere, can you provide contact information?
I'll put the contact information in our chat for everyone to have.
And also, I will post the link for the DCO Big webpage. I believe that wraps up. Like I mentioned, there's a lot more in-depth questions that I think would just be a disservice if we answered them this way. I think everyone's warranted more one-on-one counseling when it comes to their own situations. So Brad did post his contact information. I posted the webpage for the Big Grant, and Ciere and Marcus, I believe you will be posting a couple links and contact information as well. I believe that wraps it up. All right. So I do want to thank each panelist for their time this morning, for informing Illinois small business owners of these grant opportunities. It is still a difficult time for many, so I do appreciate you guys sharing this information. And do you guys just want to end with a couple words?
Just say thank you to all of you for running good businesses, keeping up the fight, and continuing to just do what you do in order to create jobs and wealth in your communities. Accion is a nonprofit. This is all we care about. And so this is certainly one very, very large program that will help us to do this kind of support. But if there's anything else we can do, obviously we'd like to do so. But thank you all for it and for your time today.
And just to echo Brad's sentiments, I think thank you for allowing us to present. I think both T and I and Liz are thrilled to have the support from DCO to be able to provide this support to so many small businesses who need it desperately. And so if there are questions, we'd rather you ask so we can find out if, in fact, you're eligible. We want to help as many small businesses as possible, and so don't hesitate to reach out. We want to get these grant dollars out and get you guys back, not surviving, thriving, because it's time. So thank you.
And before we hop on, our Chicago Chief Small Business Officer, Kenya Mayer, did hop on. Hello, Kenya.
Hi, Alisa. And just a huge thanks really quickly to Brad Marcus, and Ciere. We called them literally at the last minute as soon as the grants were stood up and they were indoors. So great big thank you to each of them. They are all a part of amazing organizations here in Chicago that support our small business ecosystem. So thank you guys again for being here today.
Absolutely.
And thank you, everyone.